Neil Diamond's zipper broke wide open right in the middle of his biggest hit in front of 50,000 fans. And what he did next had the entire stadium laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. You're going to discover how one of music's greatest entertainers turned an embarrassing wardrobe malfunction into the funniest moment of his career. How he proved that true professionals can handle anything with grace and humor. And why this night became one of the most talked about concerts in rock and roll history. Stay until the end, because this story will show you that sometimes the best way to handle embarrassment is to laugh at yourself first, and that authenticity always wins over perfection. Los Angeles Forum, California, July 1977. The legendary venue was packed with 50,000 fans who had been waiting for this night for months. Neil Diamond was in the middle of his "I'm Glad You're Here With Me Tonight" tour, one of the most successful concert tours of the decade. His shows were selling out everywhere, breaking attendance records and cementing his status as one of the greatest live performers in the world. The atmosphere that night was absolutely electric. People had traveled from all over California and beyond to see Neil Diamond perform live. Some had driven for 8 hours, others had flown in from different states, and many had camped outside the box office overnight to secure the best seats possible. The energy in that arena was something you could almost touch, vibrating through the air like a living, breathing thing. As the lights dimmed at exactly 8 o'clock, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause and screaming that shook the building's foundation. And then Neil Diamond walked onto that stage, and the place went absolutely insane. He was wearing his signature style, tight leather pants that had become his trademark, a sparkly sequined shirt that caught every spotlight and reflected it back like a disco ball, and those platform boots that added an extra 3 inches to his height. His dark, curly hair was perfectly styled with just the right amount of that 70s feathering, and he wore those tinted aviator glasses that made him look both mysterious and approachable at the same time. He grabbed the microphone with the confidence of a man who had performed thousands of shows and owned every single stage he stepped on. The opening notes of Sweet Caroline filled the arena, and 50,000 voices joined in immediately, singing along to every word of the song that had become an anthem for an entire generation. Neil moved across that stage with the energy of someone half his age, dancing, spinning, dropping to his knees during the emotional parts, jumping back up with his arms spread wide during the triumphant choruses. He was drenched in sweat within the first 15 minutes. The lights were hot, the energy was intense, and Neil gave every ounce of himself to that performance. For the first hour, everything was absolutely perfect. The band was tight, hitting every note with precision. The sound system was crystal clear, carrying Neil's powerful voice to every corner of that massive arena. The lights were perfectly choreographed, creating dramatic moments that enhanced the emotional impact of each song. And the audience was completely entranced, singing along, swaying, holding up lighters during the slow songs, and going wild during the upbeat numbers. But then, during the beginning of Cracklin' Rosie, one of his biggest hits, something happened that nobody, least of all Neil Diamond himself, could have predicted. Neil was in the middle of one of his signature moves, a dramatic knee slide across the front of the stage that fans absolutely loved. He had done this move hundreds of times before without any problems. It was choreographed, practiced, smooth as silk. But on this particular night, as he slid across that stage on his knees, with the spotlight following him and the crowd going absolutely insane, there was a sound that cut through the music. A loud, distinct rah rip that was amplified by the microphone Neil was holding close to his body. Neil froze mid-slide. The band kept playing, unaware of what had just happened, but Neil knew immediately what that sound meant. And so did about 3,000 people in the front rows who had a clear view of what had just occurred. His tight leather pants, the trademark pants that had been part of his stage persona for years, had split right down the front. Not just a little split. Not a discreet tear that could be hidden. The entire zipper had given way, and the front of his pants had opened wide, revealing considerably more of Neil Diamond than anyone had paid to see that evening. For exactly 3 seconds, Neil Diamond, one of the smoothest performers in the business, looked like a deer caught in headlights. His eyes went wide behind those tinted glasses. His mouth opened slightly in shock. His brain was probably racing through all possible solutions to this unprecedented crisis. And then something amazing happened. Instead of panicking, instead of running off stage in embarrassment, instead of trying to hide or cover up or pretend nothing was wrong, Neil Diamond did what he had always done best. He turned a potentially disastrous moment into entertainment. He stood up slowly, very carefully keeping his guitar positioned strategically in front of himself, and walked to center stage. The band was still playing Cracklin' Rosie, but they were starting to sense that something was off. Neil's backup singers were looking at each other with confusion, wondering why Neil had stopped singing. The spotlight operator was frantically trying to figure out where to aim the light, because Neil wasn't moving the way he usually did. And then Neil held up his hand, signaling to the band to stop playing. The music slowly faded out until there was complete silence in that arena of 50,000 people. You could have heard a pin drop. Neil stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching out, building tension and anticipation. And then he spoke into the microphone, his voice carrying to every corner of that massive space. "Well, folks, I have some news, and I'm not sure how to tell you this, so I'm just going to say it." He paused for dramatic effect. "My pants just exploded." The arena erupted in confused laughter. People weren't sure if they had heard him correctly. Did Neil Diamond just say his pants exploded? Was this part of the show? Some kind of joke? Neil continued, a huge grin spreading across his face. "I'm serious. I'm standing here in front of 50,000 people, and my zipper has decided to retire effective immediately. The entire front of my pants has opened up like the Red Sea. And let me tell you, Moses has nothing on what just happened here." Boo! The laughter was building now, spreading through the crowd as people started to understand that this wasn't scripted, this was real, and Neil Diamond was handling it with humor and grace. "Now," Neil continued, "I have several options here. Option 1, I can run off stage and never return, spend the rest of my life in hiding, maybe move to a small village in Tibet where nobody has ever heard of Sweet Caroline." The crowd laughed louder. Option 2, I can pretend nothing happened, finish the show while carefully holding my guitar in front of me like this for the next 2 hours, which would make for a very interesting show, but probably some very confused backup singers wondering why I'm playing guitar during the ballads. More laughter, louder now. People were starting to relax and enjoy this unexpected moment of authentic humanity from a superstar. Or option 3, and hear me out on this one, we acknowledge that yes, my pants have betrayed me in spectacular fashion. We have a good laugh about it together. Someone brings me a new pair of pants, and we continue this show because you beautiful people paid good money to be here, and I'll be damned if a wardrobe malfunction is going to ruin our night. The arena exploded with cheers and applause. 50,000 people were on their feet, clapping, whistling, shouting their approval. Neil Diamond had just turned one of the most potentially embarrassing moments of his career into a bonding experience with his audience. But Neil wasn't done. "Now, I need everyone's help with something. I'm going to very carefully walk backward off stage to preserve what little dignity I have left. And while I'm gone, I want you all to sing Cracklin' Rosie for me. Can you do that? Can you keep the party going while I deal with my clothing crisis?" The crowd roared their agreement. "All right, but I want to hear you. I want them to hear you singing in San Francisco. I want the astronauts in space to look down and wonder what that sound is coming from Los Angeles. Give me everything you've got." And with that, Neil Diamond began walking backward off stage, guitar held strategically in front, taking exaggerated careful steps like he was walking through a minefield. The image of this superstar shuffling backward in his sparkly shirt and broken pants, trying to maintain his dignity while clearly finding the whole situation hilarious, was so absurd and so human that the crowd loved it. The band, finally understanding what was happening, launched back into Cracklin' Rosie, and 50,000 people sang at the top of their lungs. They sang the verses, they sang the chorus, they sang parts of the song they didn't even know the words to, making up lyrics and not caring because they were having the time of their lives. Backstage was chaos. Wardrobe people were frantically searching for another pair of leather pants in Neil's size. Managers were on phones trying to find local stores that might be open at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Neil's tour manager was having a mild panic attack because this had never happened before in all their years of touring. But Neil himself was laughing. He was standing backstage, still holding his guitar, looking down at his destroyed pants, and laughing so hard he had tears in his eyes. "Well," he said to his backup singers who had followed him off stage, "that's one for the memoirs." One of the wardrobe assistants came running up with a pair of pants, but they were the wrong size, way too big. Another assistant found a pair that might work, but they were brown, not black, and they would look ridiculous with Neil's sparkly shirt. A third assistant suggested maybe Neil could wear a long jacket over his broken pants and just stay at the microphone stand for the rest of the show. Neil shook his head. No. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Get me whatever pants fit, I don't care what color they are. Actually, you know what? Get me the most ridiculous pants you can find. If my regular pants are going to betray me, let's have some fun with it. Out in the arena, the crowd had finished singing Cracklin' Rosie approximately 7 times. They weren't getting tired. If anything, they were getting more energized. This unplanned sing-along was becoming one of the highlights of the show. People were dancing in the aisles, strangers were hugging, everyone was united in this moment of pure, unexpected joy. Finally, after about 10 minutes, the arena lights dimmed again, and a single spotlight hit center stage. The crowd erupted in anticipation. And then Neil Diamond walked back out, and the place went absolutely insane. He was wearing a pair of bright red pants, not leather, not black, not anything like what he had been wearing before. Bright, fire-engine red pants that looked like they might have come from a circus performer or a matador. He walked to center stage with his arms spread wide, showing off his new outfit like a model on a runway, turning in a circle so everyone could see. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "may I present my emergency backup pants? I believe these were last worn by a very fashionable bullfighter, or possibly a very confused Santa Claus. But they fit, they're intact, and most importantly, the zipper appears to be made of industrial-grade materials that will hopefully survive the rest of this show." The laughter was deafening. People were crying, they were laughing so hard. This was no longer just a concert, this was an experience, a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. "Now," Neil continued, "I know what you're thinking. Neil, those red pants are absolutely ridiculous. And you're right. But you know what? Life is ridiculous sometimes. Things don't go according to plan. Your pants explode in front of 50,000 people, but you have 2 choices. You can let it ruin your night, or you can put on some ridiculous red pants and keep going." The crowd cheered their agreement, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to finish this show. We're going to sing every song I promised you. We're going to have the best time of our lives. And years from now, when people ask you about the time you saw Neil Diamond in concert, you're going to have one hell of a story to tell. And that's exactly what happened. For the next 2 hours, Neil Diamond performed like a man possessed. The red pants became part of the show, a running joke that he returned to between songs. During Song Sung Blue, he pointed to his pants and sang "Red Pants Worn by Me" instead of the actual lyrics, and the crowd went wild. During I Am, I said, He ad-libbed a line about wardrobe malfunctions and vulnerability that actually enhanced the emotional impact of the song. During the encore, when he performed America, he changed some of the lyrics to reference his pants situation, and 50,000 people sang along to this improvised version like it was the original. But beyond the humor, something else happened that night. Neil's willingness to be vulnerable, to laugh at himself, to turn an embarrassing moment into shared joy, created a connection with that audience that went deeper than any perfectly executed performance ever could. People weren't just watching a superstar perform, they were sharing a genuine human moment with someone who wasn't afraid to show that he was just as human and imperfect as they were. When the show finally ended, when Neil took his final bow in those ridiculous red pants, the standing ovation lasted for 15 full minutes. People didn't want to leave. They stayed in their seats, applauding, cheering, celebrating not just the music, but the experience they had all shared. Let me ask you a question I want you to answer in the comments. Have you ever had an embarrassing moment that you turned into something positive? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments, because I want to hear your stories. The next day, newspapers and entertainment magazines across the country ran stories about what happened at the Los Angeles Forum. Instead of focusing on the wardrobe malfunction itself, they focused on how Neil handled it. Headlines read things like, "Neil Diamond turns pants disaster into comedy gold," and "Singer proves class is about how you handle the unexpected." Music critics who had been at the show wrote that this was one of the most memorable concerts they had ever attended, not despite the malfunction, but because of it. One critic from Rolling Stone magazine wrote a piece that became famous in music journalism circles. He wrote, "In an industry obsessed with perfection, where every note is rehearsed and every movement choreographed, Neil Diamond showed us something rare and precious. He showed us that authenticity and humor are more valuable than flawless execution. He reminded us that live performance is called live for a reason, because anything can happen, and how we respond to those unexpected moments defines us more than how we handle the planned ones." And the red pants that Neil wore for the rest of that show became a part of rock and roll folklore. Fans started bringing red pants to Neil's concerts, waving them like flags during the shows. Some people started a tradition of wearing red pants to Neil Diamond concerts, creating a sea of red in the audience as a tribute to that night. Neil himself kept those red pants. He had them framed and hung in his home office, with a plaque underneath that read, "Emergency Backup Pants, Los Angeles Forum, July 1977, the night that saved the show." In interviews over the years, Neil talked about that night with fondness and humor. "It taught me an important lesson," he said in an interview about 10 years after the incident. "We spend so much time trying to be perfect, trying to control every aspect of our performances and our public image. But the truth is, perfection is boring. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with authenticity, with vulnerability, with shared humanity." He continued, "When my pants ripped that night, I had a choice. I could be mortified and let it ruin the show, or I could acknowledge the absurdity of the situation and invite the audience to laugh with me. And you know what? Laughing with 50,000 people at your own misfortune is one of the most liberating experiences you can have." The incident also changed how other performers thought about stage mishaps. Before that night, the conventional wisdom in the entertainment industry was to pretend nothing was wrong, to power through technical difficulties or wardrobe malfunctions without acknowledging them. But Neil Diamond proved that sometimes the best response is to address the elephant, or in this case, the broken zipper, in the room. Musicians who were just starting their careers in the late 70s often cited that night as an influence on how they approached live performance. Bruce Springsteen, who was developing his own legendary reputation as a live performer, reportedly said that hearing about how Neil handled the pants situation taught him that connecting with audiences was more important than executing a perfect show. David Bowie, known for his theatrical performances and elaborate costumes, mentioned in an interview that one of his backup plans for wardrobe malfunctions was inspired by Neil Diamond's red pants solution. Always have something ridiculous available as a backup, so you can turn a disaster into comedy. The footage of that night exists in various forms. Several people in the audience had cameras, which was unusual for 1977, and they captured parts of the incident. The official tour photographer was there and got shots of Neil in the red pants that became iconic images, and the audio was recorded by the venue for archival purposes. Years later, when Neil Diamond released a box set of his greatest live performances, he included a track from that night. Not one of the perfectly performed songs, but the moment when he announced his pants had exploded, complete with the audience's reaction and his improvised comedy routine. The liner notes for that track read simply, "Sometimes the best moments are the unplanned ones." The psychological impact of that night on Neil himself was profound. He talked in later interviews about how it freed him from the pressure of perfection. "Before that night, I was always worried about what could go wrong," he said. "I'd lie awake the night before shows, running through every possible disaster scenario. But after my pants literally exploded in front of 50,000 people, and it turned out fine, better than fine actually, I realized that the worst had already happened and I survived it. Nothing else seemed scary after that." This newfound freedom reportedly influenced his performances for the rest of his career. People who saw Neil Diamond in concert before and after the pants incident noticed a difference. He was looser, more willing to improvise, more interactive with audiences, more willing to take risks. The incident became a defining moment, not just in one concert, but in his entire approach to live performance. The leather pants industry, believe it or not, actually felt some impact from this incident. Several manufacturers started advertising their pants as being reinforced in key areas to prevent the kind of failure that happened to Neil Diamond. One company even sent Neil a pair of their indestructible leather pants with a note that said, "Guaranteed never to betray you on stage." Neil, with his usual humor, wore those pants to his next concert and made a big show of doing dramatic knee slides and splits to test their durability. They held up, and he sent the company a thank you note that they used in their advertising for years afterward. Fashion designers who worked with musicians started paying more attention to the durability and flexibility of stage costumes. The incident highlighted something that hadn't been widely discussed before, that stage clothing needs to withstand a level of physical activity that regular clothes don't, and that looking good isn't enough if the clothes can't survive a 2-hour high-energy performance. For the 50,000 people who were in that arena that night, the experience became a core memory. In the decades that followed, as those fans grew older and told their children and grandchildren about the time they saw Neil Diamond in concert, the pants story always featured prominently. Message boards and early internet forums dedicated to Neil Diamond had entire threads where people who were there that night shared their memories, and amazingly, every person remembered it slightly differently. Some swore he was wearing red pants, others remembered them as orange. A few were convinced they were pink. The exact color didn't matter. What mattered was that they had all shared in something special, an authentic moment of humanity from a superstar who wasn't afraid to be human. Schools of performing arts and theater programs started using the incident as a teaching tool. Students studying stage performance and crisis management would watch the footage and analyze how Neil handled the situation. Professors would point out specific techniques, how he used humor to diffuse tension, how he included the audience in solving the problem, how he turned the focus from embarrassment to entertainment, how he maintained control of the situation while being vulnerable. The incident even made it into academic papers about performance psychology and crisis communication. The Red Pants themselves gained such legendary status that years later, when Neil Diamond was being honored at a Kennedy Center tribute, one of the performers in the tribute show came out wearing comically oversized red pants as a reference to that night. The audience, which included many music industry veterans who knew the story, erupted in laughter and applause. Neil, sitting in the presidential box, stood up and took a bow. In 2018, when Neil Diamond announced his retirement from touring due to his Parkinson's disease diagnosis, the tributes and retrospectives that flooded media outlets almost always mentioned the pants incident. It had become as much a part of his legacy as Sweet Caroline or his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One farewell article summed it up perfectly. Neil Diamond gave us decades of beautiful music, but he also gave us something equally valuable. He showed us how to laugh at ourselves, how to turn disaster into joy, how to be human in front of the world and not be afraid. The Los Angeles Forum, where it all happened, commemorates that night in a subtle way. In the hallway leading to the main arena, among the photos and posters of legendary performances, there's a small display case. Inside is a replica of a pair of red pants, not the actual ones Neil wore, those are in his home, but a symbolic pair. The plaque reads, "In memory of the night anything could happen, and anything did. Neil Diamond, July 1977. Musicians who perform at the Forum often stop by that display case before their shows. It's become something of a good luck tradition. Touch the red pants. Remember that even legends have wardrobe malfunctions, and know that how you handle the unexpected matters more than perfection." Some performers have reported that seeing that display calms their pre-show nerves, reminding them that even if things go wrong, they can still turn it into something memorable. The incident also became a touchstone in discussions about authenticity in the entertainment industry. In an era where everything is increasingly choreographed, filtered and controlled, the story of Neil Diamond's pants stands as a reminder of a time when live meant truly live, unpredictable and real. Cultural critics have written about how the increasing use of pre-recorded tracks, lip-syncing, and digitally perfected performances have created a distance between performers and audiences, and they point to moments like the pants incident as examples of the authentic connection that's being lost. Some fans who were children when they attended that concert with their parents have taken their own children to Neil Diamond tribute shows and Neil Diamond-themed events, specifically to pass down the story of the red pants. It's become a family tradition for some, a shared piece of history that connects generations. One fan wrote on a forum, "My dad took me to that show when I was 12 years old. I'm now 62, and I took my granddaughter to a Neil Diamond tribute concert last year. When the performer's zipper got stuck before anyone could get worried, my granddaughter leaned over and whispered, 'Don't worry, Grandpa. If Neil can handle it, so can he.'" The lesson had been passed down through 3 generations. The story has also been referenced in popular culture. Sitcoms have done episodes inspired by it, where characters have wardrobe malfunctions at important moments and remember Neil Diamond's example. Stand-up comedians have told the story as part of their acts, using it to illustrate points about grace under pressure or the importance of humor. And musicians across all genres have adopted the red pants philosophy, the idea that when something goes wrong, you acknowledge it, you laugh about it, and you keep going. Now let me ask you one more question for the comments. What's the most embarrassing moment you've turned into a funny story? Or what's a time when laughing at yourself made a bad situation better? Share your experiences because I think we can all learn from each other. If you enjoyed this story, If it made you laugh or think about how we handle embarrassment and unexpected situations, share this video with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. And remember, the next time something embarrassing happens to you, think of Neil Diamond in his red pants, standing in front of 50,000 people, choosing to laugh instead of hide. Sometimes the most memorable moments aren't the perfect ones, they're the ones where we show our humanity, embrace the absurdity of life, and invite others to laugh with us instead of at us. Thank you for watching until the end. Until next time, remember that everyone's pants explode sometimes, metaphorically or literally. It's how you handle it that matters. Keep laughing, keep being authentic, and never let a wardrobe malfunction ruin your show.